Well, here we are. It's Thursday night. It's Lunar Eclipse night. We're going to take a look at what's going on weather-wise and whether you'll be able to see it or not. Uh, we also have what's going to be a pretty rough couple of days ahead. First for the Mississippi Valley, then for the Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, and Deep South, and ultimately in the East. With severe weather front and center. We'll talk all about it tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which you can support, very easily by doing your Amazon shopping via our referral link that's pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the description to this podcast. It's very simple. Just search and shop for your stuff, and Amazon will throw us back a little bit of coin for sending you there. Doesn't cost you a cent. It's all out of their pocket. It's an easy and quick way to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which we certainly appreciate because it keeps commercials away. Quiet John kicks off Super Chat tonight, Joe, by hitting the tip jar. Thank you, Quiet John.
Thank you very much.
Always welcomed and always generous. Thank you, sir. All right, so Lunar Eclipse night, Mr. Rayo. I'm sure you're all excited.
Well, I get excited about astronomical events such as this, and it's certainly something that I think a lot of people should try to see. Along with the fact that it's a beautiful and eerie sight. Unfortunately, it's going to happen in the wee hours of the morning, so you may want to set your alarm clock and get up.
Set your time to WCBS. Four tones will follow.
Can't do that anymore, can we?
No, you can't. I do want to point out, because I do have, I got a tight satellite loop here, and you can see if you're in coastal and much of southern New Jersey now, and down into southern Delaware, it's overcast, and there's some low cloudiness moving into eastern Long Island. It looks like it's trying to bulge back westward. Go inland, though, it's still pretty decent. Skies are clear across North Jersey, the Hudson Valley, and on up into Connecticut and points west and north. Some high clouds up in upstate New York. But, those clouds that are just offshore, that's particularly the low clouds, are a bit of a concern, I think, with the now that we're getting into the overnight period.
Well, where I am right now, I just stepped outside a few moments ago. Perfectly clear. There is not even a wisp of high cloud cover. So I'm hoping that it stays this way at least until 2 or 3 in the morning, so that we'll be able to catch the total phase of the eclipse. So anyway, we're going to this is going to be a very brief PowerPoint presentation as to inform all of you exactly what is going to be happening tonight. And to do that, I'm going to have to get the share switch on, hit that, hit this, and go to slideshow, and go to current slide. Okay, so more often than not, when we have a full moon, and that's when the moon is exactly opposite to the sun in the sky. A lot of people, sometimes like to catch a photograph of the moon rising. And they say, well, I don't know exactly where on the horizon it's going to be. All you have to do is wait until just about sundown and then see where your shadow is. Your shadow will be pointing to that part of the horizon where the full moon is, because the full moon is completely illuminated at full phase. And more often than not, the moon, when it's at full phase, will either pass above the Earth's shadow or below the Earth's shadow, and there's no eclipse. But tonight is one of those special nights where the moon, the sun, and the Earth will be almost precisely aligned, and so we are going to be seeing a total eclipse of the moon. The other thing I should point out, and I'm sure a lot of you know this already, the moon does not shine on its own. The moon is shining strictly by reflected sunlight. So obviously, if you were to rob the moon of any sunlight, And in this case, if you were to push it into the shadow of the Earth, logic dictates that the moon would black out, that you would lose sight of the moon completely while it's in the shadow of the Earth. But it doesn't black out. Here is a composite photo of a recent total eclipse of the moon. And by the way, we learned back in grammar or elementary school that when Christopher Columbus was sailing the ocean blue in 1492, one of the things he was trying to do is prove that the world was round.
In
Nonsense.
1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Yes,
However, in 1493, Columbus sailed the deep blue sea.
I did not know that.
Yes, you did.
I never heard that limerick. Well, anyway, so during, you may have learned or were taught by your teacher that Columbus was trying to prove the world was round, but that's nonsense because we knew that the Earth was a globe. We
She's
knew that the
round. She's
yes,
flat. She's round like my head. She's a flat like your head.
or flat, like a pancake.
Like a
Uh,
pancake.
yes. So in this composite, you can see that an Aristotle from the 4th century BC, knew that the Earth was round because when the moon underwent an eclipse, the shadow of the Earth, only something that's round or curved, would produce a curved shadow. And you can see here is the outline of the shadow of the Earth on the moon. But notice also that as the moon moves into the shadow, instead of completely blacking out, as one would expect, because again, it's being robbed of sunlight, and inside that shadow, it is supposedly dark. It is not. The moon lights up like an orange or coppery ball. Why does that happen? It happens because we have an atmosphere. And for those of you who may remember a little earth science, you know that our atmosphere is teeming with tiny little dust particles. And when the sun is high, high in the sky, the light rays from the sun take a shorter distance to reach your eye. In fact, you may remember also your earth science teacher showing you with a prism, a triangular piece of glass, how you could break sunlight up into various colors of the spectrum: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Roy G. Biv, remember him, Joe?
Yes, I
Anyway,
do.
the short wavelengths of light interacting with those dust particles lean more toward a blue coloration. That's why the sky appears blue. It's what we call Rayleigh scattering. Anyway, that's when the sun is high in the sky, but when the sun is low in the sky, just coming up over the eastern horizon or going down over the western horizon, the light rays from the sun are taking a longer time to get to your eye. Now we're leaning toward the long wavelengths of light, and long waves tilt more toward the yellows, oranges, and reds of the spectrum. That's why when the sun is low in the sky, near the eastern or western horizon, right around the rim of the horizon, we see that beautiful orange or reddish coloration. Now, keeping that in mind, tonight, if you were on the surface of the moon, if you were an astronaut or a cosmonaut walking on the surface of the moon and looking up into the sky, for you, obviously this is not an eclipse of the moon because you're on the moon. This would be an eclipse of the sun. The Earth would be passing in front of the sun because the Earth gets between the sun and the moon. Now, from the moon, the Earth is about 4 times the angular size of the moon as seen from the Earth, 4 times bigger. So it's like a huge, big black plate, if you will, passing in front of the sun, not only covering the sun, but also covering the beautiful corona that everybody goes to see when we see a total eclipse of the sun. However, when we have that alignment and when the sun is completely blocked out by that Earth, what happens? We see a red ring of light shining around the edge of the Earth. That red ring is our atmosphere. Remember, I said that near the horizon, right around the rim of the horizon, where the long wavelengths of light proliferate, that long wavelength of light is a red or coppery color. And the atmosphere acts like a lens, if you will. It bends or refracts that red color into the shadow. And so as a result, the shadow of the Earth is not really dark. In fact, it is a cone of light, red light. And when the moon goes into that cone of shadow, it doesn't disappear. In fact, it is illuminated by that red color. Here is an artist's conception of what happens during a total eclipse of the sun as seen from the moon. There you see the big black plate, the disk of the Earth passing in front of the sun, but also you see that red ring of light, the atmosphere of the Earth surrounding that dark plate or that dark disk, and that red light suddenly becomes the only illumination for the moon. And as you can see, that red light lights up the lunar landscape with a reddish coloration. And that's why when we look to the moon during the total phase of the eclipse, the moon doesn't black out. The moon shines with that reddish or coppery color. Now, interesting, a couple of weeks ago, we managed to land, in fact, the first commercial flight that landed safely on the moon, and the name of the mission was the Blue Cloud mission, and the name of the space probe is right there. You can see it is called the Firefly. The Firefly landed on the moon. You can see that it also has a solar panel here, and it has been taking pictures of the moon. But tonight, a first. Tonight, the Firefly is going to make the attempt to photograph an eclipse of the sun from the moon. Never really been done before, but it is going to be attempted tonight. And so we may finally get to see what it really looks like on the lunar surface during an eclipse of the sun, or for us, an eclipse of the moon. So this is going to be a very interesting event or occurrence, and hopefully in the next day or two we'll see the pictures that were taken by the Firefly probe from the surface of the moon. Also, you talk about a flash freeze. Joe and I, sometimes in a meteorological term, we talk about a sharp cold front moving through, followed by a sharp drop in temperature. Sometimes the drop is maybe 15, 20 degrees in 1 hour. That's nothing compared to what's going to happen on the lunar surface tonight. As the moon plunges into the shadow of the Earth, that shadow, blocking out all of the sunlight, is going to cause a tremendous drop in temperature. On the surface of the moon, the temperatures in full sunlight right now, depending upon where you are on the lunar surface, ranges from about 150 to 200 degrees above zero. When that shadow sweeps by and suddenly the sunlight is cut off, the temperature on the lunar surface is going to drop within a span of less than an hour, sometimes in only about 30 or 40 minutes, from about 200 degrees above zero to 150 below zero. We're talking about a 350-degree drop in temperature in only about an hour's time. That's, of course, because the moon doesn't have an atmosphere to hold in or trap the heat that is suddenly being radiated out into space. But, interestingly, this picture shows a view of a totally eclipsed moon in infrared. And infrared is very interesting because during totality, you see these spots of light. This is the crater Copernicus. This is the crater over here, Kepler, Aristarchus, Tycho. They all are glowing with a whitish color. They are hot spots. For whatever reason, and we're still really not aware or not understanding why, some craters on the surface of the moon apparently are able to retain their heat for a very long time, even after the shadow has moved on through. So the temperatures inside some of these craters don't fall anywhere near as rapidly as the surrounding surface of the moon. So that's why in infrared they glow this white color. They're called hot spots on the moon. And again, there's some theories. There may be some volcanism, some volcanic activity going on beneath the lunar surface, or at least beneath some of these craters that warm the craters enough so that they stay warm even during the totality of the eclipse. I'm sure that there'll be a few scientific experiments tonight looking at the moon with infrared and to see just which craters remain, again, relatively warm while the rest of the moon cools down really, really fast. And of course, after the shadow moves on by, after the shadow has passed, the temperature correspondingly goes up again very rapidly from like 150 below to 200 above in a matter of just about, a half hour to an hour. So again, you talk about a flash freeze and then a sudden warm up, depending upon where you are on the lunar surface and depending upon what phase of the eclipse is taking place at that given moment in time. Now, this is the track that the moon is going to take through the shadow. There actually are two shadows. There's a deep central shadow. This shadow is called the umbra. From the umbra, the sun, if you were inside the umbra, you would see the sun completely covered by the disk of the earth. And there's a secondary shadow, a fainter shadow called the penumbra. And from the penumbra, only part of the sun is covered. When you're at the edge of the penumbra, well, there's only a little bit of that shadow on the surface of the moon, and you don't really see much of anything. But by about 12:55 tonight, Eastern Daylight Time, you will be able to notice that there's like a smudge of darkness on the disk of the moon. And at 1:09 a.m., the moon will begin to push into the dark umbral shadow, and you'll begin to see what looks like a bite on the lower left-hand side of the moon's disk. And as the minutes tick off, the moon will plunge deeper and deeper into the shadow, and by 1:47, half the moon will be inside the shadow, and then from 2:26 to 3:31, during that 66-minute time frame, the moon will be completely in the shadow of the Earth, the dark shadow, the umbra, and you'll see that orange or coppery ball hanging in your sky. Then, at 3:32, the moon, one edge of it will move out of the shadow. Gradually, the moon will move slowly out. 4:10, half the moon will be out of the shadow, and by 5:05, maybe the last vestige of darkness, a little smudginess on the right-hand side, that'll be the penumbral shadow. For all intents and purposes, the moon retains its normal guise that you would see as a big full circle in the sky. Incidentally, when you look at the moon, full moon, it looks flat, one-dimensional. During totality, the moon suddenly takes on an almost three-dimensional aspect. It actually looks like an orange ball or a mottled softball or baseball in the sky. Very, very beautiful. If you have a pair of binoculars or a telescope, you'll be very intrigued in watching the slow change of light and dark on the surface of the moon during the middle stages of the eclipse. Now, I just showed you that the moon is moving through the shadow. It's the moon doing the moving during this event, moving from west to east through the shadows of the earth. But when you see it in the sky tonight, as you're watching tonight, you're going to see the moon appear as if the shadow was moving, as if the shadow were creeping across the disk of the moon. Again, the moon is moving into the shadow, but it will look to you like it's the shadow moving across the face of the moon. And so here we go. Now, as I just said, just before the moon enters the umbra, you'll see a bit of shading on the left-hand side of the moon. That is the faint penumbral shadow, the half shadow. But the solid, the dark umbral shadow will make its first contact with the moon at 1:09, and that's when a bite will begin to appear on the left edge of the moon. As we continue, whoops, sorry about that. Let's move that back here. Let's start again. So here we go. Now we're going to go through the whole phase here. Here you go. And again, it looks like the shadow is moving across the moon, but it's really the moon moving into the shadow. And if you happen to live in a place where there's no light pollution, where there aren't a lot of bright lights around, what's going to be interesting is that the fainter stars are going to come out. During a full moon, only a handful of stars are out because the brightness of the moon lights up the sky. But when the moon is in totality, it's going to be anywhere from 10,000 to 100,000 times dimmer. And so, as you can see here in this time lapse, look, you can see the fainter stars starting to appear even right near the edge of the moon. Can't see that when the moon is shining brilliantly and there's no eclipse, but again, it's really a dramatic thing, especially, again, if you're away from a big city, and then you get to see all the fainter stars come out. Sometimes, in certain cases, the Milky Way, which looks like a band of fuzzy, hazy light, suddenly appears arching across the sky, which you would otherwise not see during the time of a full moon. Anyway, mid totality is just a couple of minutes before 3 a.m., and then the moon will continue to progress through the shadow. 3:31, it begins to move out of the shadow. Incidentally, let me just see if I can back this up quickly here. An astrophotographer who's no longer with us, his name is Peter Levins. I knew Peter for a number of years. He lived down on Long Island. And he liked to photograph eclipses, and he said, and it does, just moments before totality, just a few minutes before the moon completely is covered by the umbral shadow, or just a few minutes after totality ends, and the first edge of the moon starts emerging from the dark umbral shadow, you have this contrast of this yellowish white rim of the moon contrasting with the rest of the moon, which looks like an orange reddish color. And he nicknamed that effect the Japanese lantern in the sky. So if you want to see the moon hanging like a Japanese lantern, go out and take a look, let's say around 2:20 a.m., or wait until after totality ends at about 3:35. You'll see it looking something like this, the Japanese lantern in the sky. That's a really pretty effect. Then the moon moves out of the shadow, and eventually it again takes on the same effect of what you would normally see when there's no eclipse. How many people will see this tonight, weather permitting? The Western Hemisphere, everywhere on the dark side of the Earth that is facing the moon, will see this eclipse. But not just North and South America, mind you, but also here near the edge where the sun is just coming up over Western Africa and Western Europe. Those folks in places like Casablanca or London will see the first half of the eclipse, and they'll see the moon actually set while still in total eclipse. They'll miss out on the second half. Or in New Zealand, a place I'd always wanted to visit, in New Zealand, it will already be Friday evening. There, the moon will rise in total eclipse and then emerge out of the shadow as it climbs the eastern sky. So I figured out it's going to be a grand total. The total number of people that will be able to see this eclipse, depending upon weather conditions, will be 1.36 billion, Mr. Sagan. 1.36 billion people will have the opportunity tonight, if they care to get out and take a look and see this moon show that's happening in their sky. Now, Joe showed you that satellite picture, the satellite view as it is right now. This is the satellite, the future satellite. This is from the Canadian global model, and this shows you the cloud cover, the expected cloud cover at 2 a.m., just before the moon enters total eclipse. As you can see, if you happen to live down in the Delmarva area or along the coastline of New Jersey, and just about into parts of New York City, and then points east across Long Island or coastal Connecticut, there's probably going to be some low cloudiness because there's a storm out here, there's high pressure to the north, there's a northeasterly flow bringing in maritime air, low cloud cover. So it's possible that if you live on Long Island, for example, you may miss out on seeing the eclipse, or there may be some breaks in the clouds, allowing you some fleeting glimpses, kind of like what Alfred Noyes wrote in the poem The Highwaymen. The moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas. That's how it may look to you if you're in any of the coastal areas tonight. But take a look inland and the Hudson Valley and points upstate New York, western New York, virtually all of Pennsylvania, northwestern New Jersey, beautifully clear skies. Well, actually, there'll probably be some patchy high clouds from time to time and place to place, but if you really want to see this eclipse and you happen to live in any of those coastal locations, instead of getting skunked, get in your car and just travel a little ways, maybe an hour or two up to the north or to the west, and you'll be in the clear zone and you will be able to see the total phase of the eclipse. One last thing I want to end with, we live in the 21st century. We live in modern times. About 50 years ago, however, and this is an actual news story that appeared in the New York Times. 50 are hurt as Cambodians fire at eclipse of the moon. At least 50 people were wounded by spent bullets in the Cambodian capital of Phnom Penh, when hundreds of troops across the city let off a fusillage of bullets at an eclipse of the moon. The soldiers, now again, this is not 500 years ago. This is not 100 years ago. This is only about 50 years ago in 1972. The soldiers, both in the streets and at guard posts, shattered an otherwise quiet Sunday dusk as they fired their weapons, trying to prevent the moon from being eaten by a mythical monster frog called Ryahu. The spent bullets plummeting back to Earth wounded pedestrians and civilians sheltering under flimsy bamboo coverings. According to ancient Cambodian legend, when we have an eclipse of the moon, the giant frog wants to eat the moon and must be stopped. So while the shooting took place in Phnom Penh, in the city's peasants and in the countryside crowded into temples and banged cymbals and gongs to ward off the disappearance of the moon. Again, generally speaking, in our modern times, just again about a half a century ago. So apparently there are some cultures that still believe that this event is controlled not by the movements of the sun, moon, and earth, but by giant monsters and giant frogs that are attempting to eat the moon in the nighttime sky. So anyway, that is the story about the eclipse. Hopefully, you'll have a chance to see it. And I said I was on Fox Weather this morning, Joe, and I ended with the following suggestion. I said to all of the parents out there who have young children, what they should do is tonight, before they put their kids to bed, take them outside, show them the moon in its full phase, point it out to them, and then explain to them what is going to happen later at night. Then put the kids to bed, and then at like say 2:30 tonight or early tomorrow morning, wake the kids up
What
and take them
parent is going to do
outside.
that?
Excuse me?
What parent is going to wake their kids up at 2:30 in the morning?
Well, a lot of people remember, a lot of old timers remember being awakened by their parents back in 1910 to see Halley's Comet.
I understand. I
And
guess.
they said,
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. That was an amazing thing. And I mean, it's the overnight hour. The kid is usually not up at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and he's going to see something that probably he's going to remember for the rest of his life. So, if you're a parent, there's something for you to do tonight. There's your homework assignment. And even I, Joe, I'm going to be out watching, but I'm not going to be out from 1 to 4:30 in the morning. I plan to set the alarm for about 2:15, just before totality. Watch the 66 minutes of totality, and then afterwards just go right back to sleep. But
Right.
there
Well,
you
he
go.
answered Frank Scalera's question. Well, because he asked about 4:30 if he'd see anything, and it's going to be over by then.
Yeah, by 4:10, half the moon will already be out of the shadow, and by 4:30, maybe only about a quarter of the shadow will be left on the moon's face. So the real show comes again between about 2:26 and 3:31 when the moon is completely inside of the shadow of the Earth.
All right. Okay, we got some super chat hits. Just wanted to mention Gary Crosby and two super chat hits from David Fuller, pointing out that there are biblical references of lunar eclipses in various books of the Bible. Very interesting there. But thank you for the super chat hit, David. And welcome to everybody tonight. Welcome to all of you on the chat board, including Joe. I guess he took some time out of fighting a busy war to join us on the chat board tonight. We have Vladimir Zelensky on the chat board. Um, and I suggested that if he needed supplies, that he could use the Amazon link that's pinned to the top of the chat board or on the description to this video to do some supply shopping. This way, he can take care of what he needs to take care of on his end, and he can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast at the same time.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
okay.
well, it was a surprise to me. Welcome to those of you who are watching in the background tonight, and we're here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. So subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure you turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. If you like the show, hit the like button. We're already at 68 likes, so we'd love to get to 100. That's always our goal every night. All right, so hopefully those low clouds will behave themselves. And in the meantime, we got some wicked weather that's going to be moving across the U.S. Over the next couple of days, SPC is still got that slight implied slight risk zone from North Florida to northern New Jersey and northern Pennsylvania for Sunday. I kind of think that that implies the marginal risk is probably going to be somewhere in the Hudson Valley and maybe at least up into southern New England. Um, this is a pretty powerful front, and we also before Sunday we've got back-to-back days of at least moderate risk of severe weather being forecast by SPC. Tomorrow in the Mississippi River Valley, particularly in the middle Mississippi River Valley. And then on Saturday, it's from the Ohio Valley down through the deep south, including me. I'm in an enhanced risk for severe weather. And I think they got me in a 10% tornado risk as well.
But you're hopefully not, the tornado will not be able to climb the mountain.
Hopefully. But I'm more concerned about the wind because in that
Straight
severe
line
weather
winds.
event a couple of weeks ago, when looking at the soundings showing 60 and 70 mile an hour winds at the 900 millibar level, a lot of that wind played down, mixed down to the surface. It was not fun, and I lost power for 12 hours out of that. So I don't want to go through that again.
Well, hopefully you will not have to deal with that again, although with a 10% risk of tornadic activity in your general vicinity, you know that there's going to be some very active weather probably with the approach and passage of that front this weekend.
Oh yeah, and it's also been bone dry here. Other than these, we've been going 10 days in between rainfalls, and that's been everything's like cement again. But of course, it's dry in the Northeast. It should at least get some rain out of this. Let's start looking at some maps and take a look at how this is playing out. Now tonight, the energy is in the west, and they've been seeing some stormy weather there. We've got a lot of watches and warnings up, lots of winter storm warnings up through the mountains in California, both the Sierra Nevadas and then the mountains that are just to the east of Los Angeles and San Diego, also up into northwestern California and on up through the Cascades. We have various winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up in Nevada, Arizona, into western Colorado, northwestern New Mexico. We also have a lot of states. Wind is the last severe weather event. We had half the country in wind advisories or high wind warnings, and we're starting to see this evolve in the same way. Uh, Wind advisories throughout much of the Southwest. We've got high wind watches up for New Mexico, much of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, the Dakotas. Winter storm watches for western Minnesota and eastern North and South Dakota. Also, a lot of red flag warnings out ahead of it because it's so dry. I even think SPC had extreme fire danger indicated. We'll take a look at that in a moment. And the first wind advisories are up now for Illinois, Missouri, Indiana, Western Kentucky, Western Tennessee, and Northern Arkansas. Also for parts of Southwest Louisiana down into South Texas. And we're likely to see more of those. Otherwise, in the east, it's fairly quiet. And here's the full view of the satellite loop tonight. Back to seeing those low clouds just off the coast. There's a little lead shortwave that ran out ahead, kicking off some scattered thunderstorms this evening in parts of Tennessee and northern Alabama, and even not too far from me. But that is weakening as it moves eastward. The high clouds have spread into North Carolina and off the Virginia coast, and that's going to continue to move to the east. And then the energy for the major storm that's going to be forming in the plains now into the western U.S. So you can see a lot of clouds and a lot of moisture there streaming northward up into the Dakotas. The radar at the moment in the east, we've got these scattered showers and storms in eastern Tennessee and northern Alabama, also in South Georgia and northern Florida. The northeast and mid-Atlantic states are quiet. And in the west, we've got snow in northern Utah and also in southern Utah, northern Arizona. There's actually a snow squall warning that's been put up. I'm not sure if that's near Flagstaff. It might be. And further south, we have a severe thunderstorm warning that's popped up not too far from Phoenix. A little cluster of storms there. A few severe thunderstorm warnings in the interior of California with some showers of heavy rain and also some snow up in the Sierra Nevadas, and that continues on up into the Pacific Northwest. Storm Prediction Center tonight, marginal risk from Alabama to southwest Georgia, and then you see general thunderstorms in a lot of areas in the west, in Utah, nosing up into Montana, south into Arizona, New Mexico, and then west through all of California and western Oregon and Washington. Now, when we get to tomorrow, this is where it gets really busy. We have a moderate risk, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see a high risk put up, maybe if not tomorrow, maybe for the Saturday risk zone. But we have a moderate risk for eastern Missouri, much of Illinois, westernmost Kentucky and northwest Tennessee, northeastern Arkansas, and a very large area of 10% or higher tornado risk. And it's a hatched area, which means that we're talking about a EF potential for EF2 to EF5 tornadoes within 25 miles of any point in that zone. So this is going to be a fairly active day tomorrow for severe thunderstorms and for the potential for tornadoes. Moving on to day three, here's the categorical risk for day three, where we have a moderate risk for much of Mississippi and Alabama, eastern Louisiana, the eastern part of the state, and southeast Louisiana. Enhanced risk covering much of Georgia into Tennessee and a small portion of southwestern North Carolina, the slight risk pushing up into Ohio. There's no tornado risk map on date for the day three map. We'll see what they have tomorrow, but you could pretty well guess that they're going to have at least another very large 10% or higher. Might even get a 15% area of tornado risk out of this, or perhaps even higher than that if they decide to go to a high risk for tomorrow. You don't see the moderate risk that often. You see the high risk even less. And in terms of the wind, the 45% probability here in that moderate risk zone of wind gusts of 65 knots or higher. So we are talking a big deal here, the potential for damaging thunderstorms. And on the long range, day four, pretty much unchanged over the last 3 days. Northern Florida, right up the coast, all the way through Pennsylvania to the New York state line into northern New Jersey, just touching New York City. So I'm thinking, if you want to put the marginal risk tomorrow, maybe as far north as Albany, and then kind of curving down into southern New England. It'll be interesting to see what they do with this tomorrow for their first Sunday forecast.
The
And
analysis I read up from SPC was talking about the most significant activity, probably anywhere from the Virginia Capes through coastal Carolina region, point south.
that would
Not
seem to me like that, like the last time, that probably will get it. Maybe that'll get an enhanced risk there.
Yeah, and here, tri-state area. I mean, there's no question that come Sunday night we could very well see a few gusty thunderstorms. It's a front that the activity will be diminishing as it reaches the or approaches the Atlantic seaboard, but still there's going to be very potent storms associated with it. Even and as you just mentioned, Joe, we've been seeing this day after day. That one region that has been along the eastern seaboard going all the way back to what, day 5 or day 6.
Yeah.
So they're pretty, they being the guys and gals at SBC, they're pretty confident that this is going to be loaded for bear even as it approaches the eastern seaboard come later Sunday and Sunday evening.
And the other problem, a lot of times when you have these fronts, the one of the issues is, how do you discern between, you're going to have the pressure gradient's going to get tight. So you're going to have gusty southerly winds anyway. probably in the 30-mile-an-hour plus range. So, you'll have that in play to begin with. So it's not too much it won't be too much to ask if there's a thunderstorm that you might see some gusts up to 50. Even in areas near the coast, I would be a little bit careful because there's a fairly solid looking shortwave trough that's going to be moving through, and that could be supportive in terms of holding things together and sort of compensating. This is maybe a little bit less where the marine influence gets tempered somewhat because of everything that's going on. But we'll see how they play this out tomorrow. Rainfall, it's at least 3/4 of an inch to an inch, pretty much up and down the eastern seaboard, with pockets of an inch and a half in coastal Virginia, North Carolina, and also inch and a half to 2.5 inches in the parts of the Ohio and Tennessee Valley and into Mississippi and Alabama. In the west, it remains busy over the next 7 days, where we're looking at several to many inches up the Sierra Nevadas and then points northward. And of course, in those mountains in California, we are talking snow, as well as some heavy precip amounts in Utah, Arizona, the Rockies, uh, going all the way up through Idaho and into southernmost Canada. And for you snow lovers, here the probability areas where we've got probabilities for at least eight, and it's fairly, confined mainly to the higher mountains. There'll be valley rains in areas in the west too, because it's not like we have a lot of Arctic air there. It's a lot of cold air. It's polar air, but it's not, the Arctic type. So the valleys may be, getting rain, and the elevated areas, of course, will be going on it, getting on with it as far as snow is concerned. So uh, first things first, we've got this system coming now inland, and the low forms in Colorado, and the pressures are very low in the west. I mean, the first L that pops up, Joe, it's already a 984 low in northeastern Colorado, and the gradient ahead of it is pretty wicked. In fact, let me just go back to SPC just for a moment here, because we mentioned about the fire. They have this area today, tonight, it's critical fire danger from eastern New Mexico and northwest Texas all the way up into Nebraska. And then tomorrow, look at this, they have extreme in much of Texas, in central and north central and northwest Texas through Oklahoma to southeast Kansas. They have an extreme risk indicated in a very large area, excuse me, of critical that is being indicated. I can't. An isolated dry thunderstorms, by the way. I think that's what that is. ISO, yeah, ISO dry T. So that's got to be isolated dry thunderstorms being forecast. You don't see that often in places like East Kansas and Western Missouri and Northwestern Arkansas.
Right, right. Well, this as I just mentioned a little while ago. This whole storm system is loaded for bear. The only thing we don't see here is the potential for any blizzard-like conditions. I think. It,
No, unless they're localized up in parts of Minnesota where they got the winter storm watches up. That's probably where you might see it. The other interesting part of this is if you look at the radar structure, uh, there's not a lot. You get the thunderstorm formation, but it's not like you have an area of rain ahead of it. There's not a solid warm front setup with overrunning precip running up ahead. I mean, it's literally bone dry until the front gets there with storms. So it's just basically one arm, and even on the west side of this, it's a very narrow band of heavy snow that develops in eastern South Dakota and into western Minnesota. So for as deep as this low is, it's not, at least initially, doesn't have a whole lot of precip once it gets out of the Rockies. It starts to pick up more on Saturday. So you see the area that goes through tomorrow through Missouri, Illinois, to Chicago, uh, Chicago in the thick of it here, and Milwaukee. And then Saturday, as the southern part of the trough really sharpens up, that's when the really opens up, and you start to see thunderstorms develop Saturday morning across Mississippi and Alabama, and then gradually spreading up into Ohio, and then east in through eastern Tennessee and Georgia Saturday night into Sunday morning. A pretty wicked line showing up on the European. And then on Sunday, we start to see those storms approach the East Coast later Sunday afternoon into Sunday night. And the European actually has a fairly well, for the European model, it actually has a fairly well defined looking line there that forms and moves through early Sunday night across upstate New York, as well as through, all the way down to the Carolinas and offshore. And it does, unlike yesterday, the European has now decided that this is going to pick a time where the GFS is going to be right, that the front does keep on moving, and it's mostly done by daybreak Monday, and then we dry out afterwards.
Well, it looks like we're going to be on, hopefully, we'll be on the air on Sunday. I say hopefully because one of us or maybe both of us may have power problems.
That's true. That's true. Just take a look. I want to look at the 500 millibar jet here. You've got, a wrapped up cut. Anytime you see in the springtime, when you get a wrapped up cutoff like that in the plains, you know you're going to get bombed with severe weather someplace. And then, and this goes full blown negative tilt as it lifts northward. And then another short wave drops down into Texas, and that fires up the second area that forms on Saturday and Saturday night. And then that short wave translates eastward on Sunday and then moves out. And there's no real cold air behind it. And another system moving across later next week, and then it's just basically we're in the sort of west to east flow, and that means lows that are going to, more of these systems that are going to probably fire off rounds of severe weather from time to time. So we get rid of this one, and then looks like there's another low that runs from Kansas to the lakes, the middle part of next week, and then brings a front to the East Coast sometime late next week. So um, we get at least 4 days or so in between these things, 4 or 5 days in between, uh, before we get hit with another one.
Well, get ready, folks. I said this the other night. I mean, what do you do if you have a home in a location where the tornadic activity is potentially 10%, and there's the potential for an EF2 or EF3 I mean, what do? You can't move your house. You must
No,
really, you'll start working on your high blood pressure with worry with that kind of a situation. So,
well, I'm just going to take a sounding here. This is right near me. 900 millibar wind is like just under 50 knots. So, and I'm at I'm at about 940, 940 millibars. So it's going to blow away here. I
you're
am,
talking about 65 miles an hour or thereabouts.
it's 45 knots on here. So we're looking at, it mixes down. I mean, it doesn't even have to mix down that much. I'm talking gust of 50 here at least
Right.
for me.
1.15 times 45 is 51.75. So,
Right. And I'll just take a quick sounding just a quick sounding just east of New York City. And, there's like 30 to 40 knots up at 900 millibars and higher. So, if there's some strong cells, some of that wind is gonna definitely try and mix down. And if we look at where the jet stream, I always like to, you just like I like to look to see where how the wind you get the whole jet. I mean, here's the upper low. Look at this. Look at how the jet just completely wraps around into this giant comma. This is for tomorrow's round of storms in the middle Mississippi Valley, and then to the lower lakes. And then you get the second short wave, and that jet tries to wrap around and come through. This is on Saturday and Sunday as it swings over into the eastern part of the United States. And this is a very dynamic system here. It's going to keep forecasters very busy and very active with regards to all the severe weather they're going to have to deal with in the next couple of days. Uh, not not going to be fun, folks. If you're in any of those, you know, anywhere, anywhere from the Central Plains to the East Coast, but particularly, from the Mississippi River eastward, it's going to be a very rough go. And so pay attention to your forecasts and watches and warnings that go up, because there's going to be quite a few of them. You have Briller Jeopardy?
I'm not sure. I'm going to check. Hang
Well,
on for
you
a second.
while you check, I just want to Chuck Cardillo hit super chat tonight. Thank you, Chuck. Yes, I'm feeling I'm almost 100%, so I'm good. Thank you. Got over my 36-hour stomach attack that I had. So anyhow,
All
do you
right.
have it?
This is an interesting question. Not weather related. It's geographical.
Okay, and while you wait, 91 likes so far, so we only need 9 for 100. So if you like the show, hit the like button, and if you subscribe to the show, so you can take me over 15,000, which I've been dancing around for the last 3 weeks, uh, around that number. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so on this Briller Jeopardy tonight, he asks, what were the first 10 and the last 10 states admitted to our union?
The first 10
And the last
and
10.
the last 10.
Right,
All right. Well, we know that Delaware was the first state,
right.
because when you drive to Delaware, when you drive into Delaware, I think there's a sign that says the first state. And then after you pay the toll, you pass the sign says, "Thank you for thank you for you're now leaving Delaware, going into Maryland." Okay, so there's that. Um, uh, 95 in northern Delaware is just it's a very short drive. But, there's still a good 60 miles when you want to go
How
down
about
if you go
how about
south.
in Westchester County, that one spot on Interstate 684?
Right, that
There,
goes into Connecticut for like what, a mile and a half or something?
something like that. It says, "Welcome to Connecticut," and then there's a little mile and a half later it says, "You are leaving Connecticut."
Right. Oh yeah, well, if you got your GPS on, every time when I drove the last time I drove back from New York to here, I had to drive through West Virginia, and there was construction, so I was basically on state roads, and there was one stretch where I went in and out of West Virginia and Virginia. I think it was like 6 times. So every mile I would say, "Welcome to West Virginia," and I would go, "Welcome to Virginia, welcome to West Virginia, welcome to Virginia." It just kept going back and forth, back and forth. All right, so we got Delaware. The first 10 and the last 10?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we know that Alaska and Hawaii were the last two.
Well, we're jumping ahead of ourselves, aren't
Right.
we?
Okay. But the first 10 would be, I would say Delaware, um, New York, New Jersey.
Believe it or not, New York was not among the first
Oh, it
10.
figures. We didn't have a union back in 1780. All right. Well, I mean, it's got to be one of the 10 of the 13 colonies. So I'll say Delaware, Maryland, Virginia.
Maryland is on there, and Virginia is on there.
Okay. Vermont was not one of the first 13, and Canada is not part of the equation either, William Uber. Nor are the Bahamas. Okay. Thank you for the
Well,
100.
it's been a while
Um,
since we got to 100.
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire is, yes, one of the
Okay.
original.
So, Rhode Island.
No, Little Rhodey is
All right,
not
so
part of
so
the.
Rhode Island and New York were not. So that leaves only one other state that's not. So let's add North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Um, South Carolina was among the 10, but North Carolina was not.
Oh, okay. So what about Georgia?
Georgia was number 4 on this list.
Okay. So we have Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, South Carolina, and Georgia, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts is there, yes.
and Connecticut
Connecticut is there.
and Pennsylvania.
And Pennsylvania. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine. We have one that we have not gotten to yet among the
Oh,
first
okay.
10.
All right. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey,
Rhode Island was not.
Pennsylvania.
Rhode Island was not among the first
Well, no,
10.
I'm just counting through the colonies. Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. We named them all.
Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North New Hampshire, South Carolina, Georgia, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. There's one. Which one now is the one? Wait a minute. Hold on for a second. The Delaware, Pennsylvania.
Portions of this
Wait a
program
minute.
has been
Wait a minute. Wait
pre-recorded.
a minute. Yeah, Pennsylvania. That was it.
That was
Oh,
it. Okay.
wait a minute. Yeah, that's on the list too.
Now, of the remaining states,
All right, I know which one we haven't you haven't listed yet.
there's still one missing.
Yes.
Well, Maine wasn't a colony.
No. Think of
New
cows.
Hampshire. What's that?
Think of cows.
Think of cows.
Oh, wait a minute. Mrs. Hutch 53 has it. Of course, she lived there for a number of years. New Guernsey.
I said New Jersey.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't have it on my list here.
Oh,
So.
well, I said New Guernsey.
All right.
All
Okay.
right.
Well, we'll still give it to Mrs.
Uh,
Hutch anyway.
All right. Now, the last ones
The
to
last
come
one.
in. So, I would, let's say, so we know it's um, Hawaii, Alaska, and Hawaii.
Right.
Alaska in 58 and Hawaii in 59. Um, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Yep.
Okay. Um, how many of the last ones do we have? 10.
Yes.
Arizona,
Arizona. Yes, that was state number 48.
New Mexico,
New Mexico. Yes.
Wyoming,
Wyoming. Yes.
how many do we have so far?
6.
Chris Alley says Nevada.
Nevada is not on the list of the
Patrick
last 10.
Darcy says Utah.
Utah is there. Yes.
Lakeville 500 says Idaho.
Idaho. That's right. Land of the potato.
Okay. So how many do we have left?
2 left.
2 left. Uh, Wyoming from Rich Rothmansky?
We already did that. Yes, we have Wyoming on the
We
list.
have Wyoming.
Yes.
We still have 2 left.
Right.
The 2 Dakotas says Latex. It says Vincent Croce.
2 Dakotas. No.
Okay, so it's not that. Um, I don't think it's Oregon or Washington.
Mike Waterhouse Bonsai, Montana, Big Sky
Montana.
Country. Yes. So we have 1 left.
It's not Colorado, is it?
No.
No. We have 1 left. It's not Oregon, and it's not Nevada,
Right.
and it's not North and South Dakota.
How about the
Uh,
state next door to Oregon?
well, Washington?
Yeah.
I said Washington before. You said no.
I didn't. No, I'm sorry.
I mean,
Now we got
too much time on the moon.
it. Montana, Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Alaska, and Hawaii.
Okay. Well, very good. And it's coming up on 8:35.
No,
So
Louis Horatio, not Greenland.
no, I know everybody's throwing out all sorts of things. New Zealand. It's too far. Too far. Takes you a whole day to get there. Oh well. I guess we can call it a night. I may do some. I may do a weather in five video tomorrow and Saturday to cover the severe weather that's going to be going on. We're not going to be back. We're not going to be live tomorrow or Saturday, but we will be back Sunday night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time, and 105 likes. So thanks for taking us over 100, Mr. Rayo. Your lunar presentation was stellar.
Thank you. Thank you
Uh,
very much.
yeah, very informative. Um, and we'll see everybody on Sunday. Have a great Friday and a great weekend. Um,
And
and,
stay safe if
and
you
stay
happen to live
safe.
anywhere near the severe weather zones.
All right, folks. We'll see you on Sunday. Night.
Good night.